Whoa, 2017 sure did happen. Look, there's no need for preamble here. These are all the movies I saw, but since 2 of the movies would be making my top 10 and I've already done reviews on them, rather than talking about them again, here are some quick thoughts on several films that aren't on the list, but I still have thoughts on. So, let's go. Loving Vincent is a movie that would do fantastically if you put it on in the background at a party, and I don't mean that in a dismissive way. Every frame is literally a painting in this movie that's stylized to look like something painted by Vincent van Gogh. The artistry here is phenomenal, and it's a well-constructed story. While undeniably thought-provoking and visually dazzling, a ghost story feels a little self-indulgent throughout. Like, even though her performance is great, I really don't need to watch Rooney Mara grief eat an entire pie for 5 uninterrupted minutes. Action scenes are really impressive here, with one exceptionally long take fight scene that is magnificent and brutal, though they sadly cut out earlier than a very obvious punctuation to the piece, but regardless, it's the strongest fight scene I saw this year. Tense stuff, Pattinson is great, it's got a really solid soundtrack. Fun pairing, set pieces are great, it's got a really solid soundtrack. Yeah, I'm not pouring gasoline on that fire. Okay, those quick thoughts are out of the way, let's get slightly more thorough and dive into the real list. 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri is both a mouthful and a gripping piece. While the story is framed predominantly around Mildred Hayes, played by Frances McDormand, and her frustration with the police having not found the culprit in her daughter's horrendous rape and murder, in renting out 3 Billboards to voice that frustration, specifically targeting Chief Willoughby, played by Woody Harrelson, the events that unravel both fracture and bring the community closer. Writer-director Martin McDonagh continues his trend of fantastic characters, as is evident in his previous films In Bruges and 7 Psychopaths, though for me, 3 Billboards seemingly revealed itself as an ensemble piece a touch too late, and some of the devices used to carry out story seem a touch clunky. Despite those minor gripes, pairings of characters lead to some incredibly varied scenes, as 3 Billboards is looking to start a conversation, and by the film's close, you'll definitely have changed your mind a time or two about characters and their situations. Admittedly, while I like Ridley Scott as a director, not all of his films are for me, and sadly the original Blade Runner falls into that camp. The first 2 acts of the film are fantastic neo-noir, presenting some spectacular questions, but things sort of fall apart for me somewhere between the sexual assault scene between Deckard and Rachel and Rutger Hauer running around shirtless. With that in mind, I went into Blade Runner 2049 cautiously optimistic and was blown away. Story-wise, we're following a replicant, or bioengineered servant, K, who starts to unravel the possibility of replicants being able to sexually reproduce, which would severely change the game as far as society is concerned. And so, naturally, this discovery sends K down a rabbit hole, hoping to uncover where he came from, and what some of these presumed implanted memories mean. Performances are strong, action sequences are bombastic, but not too bloated. Effects are dazzling, but not overly flashy, allowing for characters and relationships to remain front and center, with the relationship between Kay and Joy, his holographic wife, being one of my personal favorites, as it added an extra layer of complexity in this world with these 2 servants of differing degrees trying to make a life for themselves. Yes, I do feel that Jared Leto was seemingly acting in a different movie, and yeah, I think the film would have actually benefited from being in the same world and yet being an isolated incident rather than being connected with Deckard, but Harrison Ford is great, and they managed to thematically bring things together pretty cleanly. But regardless of all of that, I swear to God, if cinematographer Roger Deakins doesn't win an Oscar for this film, he's been nominated and lost 13 times now. All of Blade Runner 2049 is gorgeous. I just need to stop putting stock in the Academy. They'll betray me every time. As a sucker for animation and as someone always fascinated by different cultural views on death, which I know is a weird sentence, get over it, there was very little way that I was going to dislike Coco. Plus, it's Pixar, which means I'm in store for some emotional moments. And yeah, I got misty-eyed and cried throughout. As it is a Pixar film, though, when you strip things away, the beats feel a little familiar. Our main character, in this case a boy named Miguel, finds himself separated from his family and home, and spends the majority of the movie on an adventure trying to get back. But rather than being out in the open ocean, or another part of the mine, or Sid's house, or a collector's house, or Sunnyside Daycare, he's in the land of the dead. And he winds up with an unlikely partner, in this case a musician named Hector, who ultimately he learns a lesson from. Now, regardless of perhaps a formulaic plot structure, the world and production design here are top-notch. Characters and their backstories are engaging, and there are plenty of fun and emotional moments in store. Also, there is some exceptional music, both in the form of Michael Giacchino's score and also the slew of songs peppered throughout the film. They're all fantastic and quite memorable. Simply put, Coco is a delightful film from start to end, serving as a stellar celebration of family, music, and Mexican culture that will tug at your heartstrings as Miguel plucks away on his guitar. I, Tonya is a fantastic flashback in sports history, telling the tale of Tonya Harding's upbringing, the incident involving Nancy Kerrigan, and beyond. Narratively, the story is sharp, jumping back and forth between the events themselves and interviews with the characters, and what characters they truly are. My familiarity with Margot Robbie playing the titular role of Tonya is somewhat limited, having not seen her in either the Australian soap Neighbours or the short-lived series Pan Am, but while I thought she was fine in The Wolf of Wall Street and Suicide Squad, I feared she wasn't going to get to be much more than another pretty face in Hollywood. But in I, Tonya, she's throwing all that out the window and she's crushing it. She's rough around the edges, yet determined. She's emotional and raw and funny, and has exceptional chemistry with both Allison Janney and Sebastian Stan, who play her mother and husband respectively, and they are both abusive and fantastic in their own right. Despite the darker subject matter, however, there is a dry wit to the whole piece, making it periodically feel like something written by the Coen brothers. So if you're looking for a different perspective on an infamous story that you thought you knew, with incredible camera work, editing, and solid performances across the board, then give I, Tonya a watch. Set outside of Disney World, The Florida Project is the latest from guerrilla filmmaker Sean Baker, who made a real splash at Sundance a few years back, having shot all of his feature Tangerine on an iPhone. But with The Florida Project, he's arguably more ambitious, not in the sense of the technology that he's using, but the fact that this film has a lot of kids in it, and they're all fantastic, both in terms of their performance, but also they serve as a unique lens to frame the poverty and their conditions through. Viewpoints jump between kids, their parents, and also the budget hotel's landlord, played by Willem Dafoe, and the camera shifts and the pacing of the scenes seem to shift accordingly. Scenes with kids are low to the ground with vibrant colors, while the adults tend to have a camera that's a little more loose and erratic, struggling to focus on everything going on. While The Florida Project initially feels like an ensemble piece, the scope slowly narrows to focus on two residents of the hotel, the young girl Mooney, played by Brooklyn Prince, and her mother, played by Bria Vinaite, who becomes difficult to watch as she makes increasingly awful decisions. As adults viewing, we see the struggles that Mooney's carefree mischief rightfully should miss. She should have the opportunity to be a child, but circumstances have dealt her a bad hand. The Florida Project has some of the sweetest and rawest moments I saw this year, with an earnestness that only children truly possess. It's an emotional film, but it shouldn't leave you feeling hollow afterwards, but open your eyes to both the tragedy and wonder all around us. As I've stated in previous videos on the channel, horror films work best when they tap into systemic societal fears, and as much as we'd love to believe that since Crash won Best Picture, that we live in this miraculous post-racial era, that simply isn't the case. And Get Out, the directorial debut from Jordan Peele, perfectly exemplifies and capitalizes on this. Story-wise, Get Out follows Chris, a black photographer who's going back to meet his white girlfriend's Rose's parents, who initially seem supportive, but there is a darkness lurking with her family, and from there we get plenty of tense moments that are loaded with commentary on race relations, making Get Out one of the smartest horror films I've seen. Performances are strong, with Daniel Kaluuya leading the charge. Before this, I had only seen him in Black Mirror's 15 Million Merits, but just between that and Get Out, he's shown off an incredible range, and so I'm excited to see him again in Marvel's Black Panther and Steve McQueen's upcoming film Widows. As far as the rest of the major players go, Allison Williams, Catherine Keener, and Bradley Whitford all have exceptional chemistry with Kaluuya, and Lil Rel Howery offers a perfect comedic relief just before the tension ramps back up. Now, Jordan Peele has periodically shown a darker side on his sketch show Key and Peele with Keegan-Michael Key, but Get Out allows him to go full tilt with strong theming and more nuanced characters. Stylistically, the film pays homage to a fair handful of horror films like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or Rosemary's Baby, but is original in its own right and still stings like a fresh wound. I'm very excited to see what Jordan Peele has in store for us in the future, and I can't recommend Get Out enough. Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water ultimately tells us that love and beauty come in all forms, and that sometimes the greatest monsters are those who represent the status quo. Set during the height of the Cold War, an amphibious creature is captured in South America and perceived as it's something that might be sought by the Russians, so naturally it's carted off to a facility to be kept out of sight and experimented on. Meanwhile, a mute woman, Liza, played by Sally Hawkins, finds herself increasingly drawn to the mistreated marine man as she slowly introduces it to both sign language and music, and the two grow increasingly close as they both Well, the idea of being an outsider or being perceived as less than is central to the themes of The Shape of Water, and not just because of the budding romance between these two silent characters. Liza's fiery friend, Zelda, played by Octavia Spencer, is black. Liza's artistic neighbor, played by Richard Jenkins, is gay. And then there's the aquatic thing itself, played by Doug Jones, who isn't at all respected by Michael Shannon's character, and he's basically there to be the one passing judgment on all of them, and is so wonderfully menacing. Like, everyone is great, but Del Toro wrote him as such a fun, hateable villain. Aesthetically, The Shape of Water feels fantastical while still feeling grounded, as was the case with Pan's Labyrinth and Crimson Peak. Production design is impeccable, cinematography magnificent, Alexandre Desplat's score is haunting, moody, and soulful, and then there's the Fishman himself. While this dude could be made entirely CGI, and I'm sure there are plenty of little shots with digital embellishments and cleanup happening, but the fish creature is almost entirely prosthetic costuming and just overall mesmerizing technical achievements, making it the unsung hero of the film and making The Shape of Water a modern fairy tale that will leave you spellbound. Coming-of-age tales are nothing new, especially as far as indie films go, but while Lady Bird ticks off all the expected boxes on the checklist, it does so with such precision that it elevates the story to a whole other level. The film follows Saoirse Ronan as the titular and self-titled Lady Bird in her senior year of high school, as she submits to colleges, falls in and out of love, intermingles with different social groups, argues with her family, and, is just a teen. Lady Bird has an obsession with New York City, and really anything that will get her out of Sacramento, though this yearning is undercut by her family's financial situation, with her biggest opposition coming in the form of her mother, played so brilliantly by Laurie Metcalf. And the mother daughter pairing is perfection. The two have fantastic chemistry, and the subtleties that they both bring to scenes is mesmerizing to watch. Lady Bird marks the debut of Greta Gerwig as a writer and director, and her vision is incredibly specific. Conversations, while quippy, still feel incredibly colloquial, and the relationship between characters feel lived in. Nothing feels needlessly flashy, tonally scenes feel balanced, and there's so much truth and warmth and humor, even with some of the heavier emotional moments. Lady Bird is, simply put, one of the most effortless indies I've seen, gently nudging the viewer to think about where they're from, how and who got them there, and where they've yet to go. So those are my favorite films of 2017. Leave your favorite films in the comments down below, and if you'd like to check out my reviews on Okja or The Big Sick, both of which made this list, you can give them a click or tap on screen, or you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter, because, social media, that's a thing. So comment, click, and keep loving movies, guys. Bye!